Someone in Trouble. Chapter 20. Status Quo. Sportacus! Something shiny and metallic whizzed overhead that made Sportacus and the other kids duck down. It looked like a UFO, all chrome and sleek, but when it banked around to come back, they saw a camera lens on the front of the airborne dish. It was Pixel's digicam device, and it circled them as the gizmo guy's voice came out of it from a tiny microphone. "Sportacus, can you hear me?" "I can hear you, Pixel," Sportacus said. "What's going on?" "Robbie Rotten has just been sighted, and he's got Stephanie on the run! You need to get across town right now!" "I'm on my way," Sportacus said. "We're coming too," Trixie said. "Yeah!" Ziggy threw aside his mostly eaten lollipop. "Let's all stop Robbie!" "Hey guys!" Stingy called shrilly as he ran through the park towards them. "Wait for me!" "All right," Sportacus rallied the troops. "Let's go!" He pumped his arms in his signature move to loosen up all the anxious energy coursing through his muscles, and broke into a decisive sprint with the kids following. He cut through the community garden, flipping over flower beds and vaulting off an empty wheelbarrow. Jumping and twisting through the air, he flew through the playground and sprung off the seesaw, launching himself clear over the swing set and onward. The kids all cheered his acrobatics, even as they fell behind. The only one who could keep pace with Sportacus was Pixel's digicam, flying at top speed just ahead of him, leading the way. Sportacus could hear Stephanie before he saw her. The girl was screaming and hollering like her life depended on it. Following closely on the heels of her high-pitched yelps was a much deeper and raspier voice, a nasty cackling and taunting. "There's no reason to keep running, Pipsqueak. There's nowhere to go and no one to help you now." "This isn't funny, Robbie. Please, stop it!" Stephanie tried to reason with her pursuer as she continued to run away, but it was no good. The villain let out another horrible laugh that let her know it was funny to him. Sportacus leapt up onto a low wall and looked around anxiously. Over there, flashing by in the blink of an eye, was a pink head of hair. Following not too far behind was a much larger purple shape. Robbie loped after Stephanie with a long fishing net balanced on one shoulder. It was big enough to catch a fish as big as a tuna. Or a little girl. Stephanie changed course abruptly, and Sportacus craned his neck to keep her in view. She had caught sight of the treehouse and poured on an extra burst of speed. The girl threw herself at the ladder and clambered up in record time, barged open the hatch door, and vanished inside. The door slammed shut as Robbie arrived at the base of the tree. "Leave me alone!" Stephanie shouted from the treehouse window. Robbie turned his net idly in his hands as he looked up at her. He ran his gaze from the tightly shut hatch all the way down the ladder and back up again. "You want to stay up there? Fine." Tucking the net under one arm, he seized hold of the ladder and grunted with the effort as he pulled it away from the tree. "I'll leave you alone, all right. Don't let anyone say I was all bark and no bite." The ladder creaked and shifted away from the trunk. Stephanie cried out her protest, but there was nothing she could do. With a big push, Robbie shoved the ladder clear of the tree. It stood free of any support for one long second before teetering over. "Timber!" Robbie crowed as the ladder gained speed for a hard crash into the ground, one that would surely shatter it to splinters. Sportacus sprang off the wall and tumbled through the air like a whirling dervish. He twirled around and over and landed in a handspring before throwing himself back up on his feet, just in time to raise both arms up and catch the ladder. He bowed under the weight of the large and heavy instrument, but refused to give in. Above his head, he heard Stephanie let out a gasp. "Sportacus!" she cried in shock and joy. "Sportacus!" Robbie cried at almost the same time. "Robbie Rotten!" Trixie howled, the first of the kids to catch up on the scene. "You better leave Stephanie alone!" "That's right!" Ziggy shouted close behind her. "If you want her, you have to go through all of us!" "Wait for me, I said!" Stingy panted and nearly collapsed in a heap. "Game over, Robbie!" Pixel's digicam buzzed around the villain's head, making the man startle back like he was being menaced by a bumblebee. "It looks like you just lost." Robbie got a hold of himself and let out a terrible growl. He clenched his net in both hands and swung it wildly at the flying camera. He snagged the pesky drone in mid-air with a triumphant snarl. As he swung the net around to dash the machine against the tree, however, its engines kicked into overdrive and sent it flying in the opposite direction, deep into the net. The digicam pulled hard against the net, unable to get free. It pulled so hard, in fact, that it started to drag Robbie across the ground. Robbie stumbled and clutched to the pole of the net as he fought against the flying camera. Trixie, Stingy, and Ziggy all gave loud battle cries as they rushed the villain. They grabbed at his arms and legs, meaning to knock him down. "Get off of me, you ankle biters!" Robbie staggered around with the digicam pulling him one way and the kids pushing and pulling him another. He tried to kick them off, but they held fast, and all he managed to do was give Ziggy a ride on his knee. While the kids kept Robbie busy, Sportacus could focus on helping Stephanie. He hefted the whole ladder up above his shoulders, straining his arms until the unwieldy thing was balanced over his head. Carefully, he tilted the ladder so that it rested just so against the treehouse window. "Come down, Stephanie," Sportacus encouraged her. Stephanie didn't need to be told twice. She climbed out through the window and wobbled for a moment on the ladder before hot-stepping it down the rungs with her arms out. She jumped off towards the bottom and pointed sharply towards Robbie. "Sportacus, look out!" Yanked helplessly about by the snagged digicam, Robbie wove and wobbled across the ground on a collision course for Sportacus. Sportacus gripped the heavy ladder over his head and braced himself. "Everyone get down," he commanded. One by one, Trixie, Stingy, and Ziggy let go of Robbie to tuck and roll out of harm's way, while Stephanie took cover in another direction. As Robbie came careening towards Sportacus, the blue-clad hero pivoted sharply on one heel, swinging himself narrowly out of the path of the digicam. The two men passed each other by a hair's breadth. Carried by the momentum, the ladder swung all the way around with Sportacus. With an audible whap, it caught Robbie on the backside and knocked him off his feet, face first into a hedge of bushes. The man gave a strangled yell as he crashed through the foliage, out of sight. All of the children ran over to join Sportacus and watched the bushes shake and shudder as Robbie crashed around within their branches. Pixel's digicam darted out of the hedge after a moment, finally freed. As for Robbie... The purple pinstriped man lumbered up to his feet in the middle of the bushes with his own net tangled over his head and shoulders. He grimaced and glowered at the kids and their hero, before turning tail and making his clumsy getaway. They didn't try to chase after him. Everyone was too busy laughing and cheering. "Sportacus, you did it!" Ziggy applauded his idol as the man carefully propped the ladder back up against the tree where it belonged and dusted off his hands. "That was so cool!" Trixie laughed. "Oh, Sportacus, thank you!" Stephanie threw her arms around Sportacus and they shared a hug. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." "No kidding," Stingy said. "Who would have guessed that Robbie would go so rotten? Ugh!" "Yeah," Ziggy agreed with a whine in his voice. "After all the cake we ate and all the games we played, I really thought he was our friend." Maybe it was all just a trick, Pixel's voice suggested through his digicam. We should never have trusted Robbie. That's right, Trixie said. If I never saw Robbie again, it would be too soon. Are you sure about that? Sportacus asked. Couldn't this just be some misunderstanding? What is there to misunderstand? Stephanie asked. He doesn't want to be our friend. He's just a mean, horrible... The girl choked up and her face went pink. He's bad, she finished shortly. There was no more to be said on the matter. And anyway, everything's fine now, Stingy said. Now that you're back, Sportacus. The other kids agreed and rallied around Sportacus all the closer, excited to celebrate his return. Now, let's go get my car out of that hole! It was over so quickly. Sportacus really was fast. Robbie had to hand it to him. 1 minute, Robbie had it all. The respect, the power, the fun. And the next minute, it was gone. It had been fun, too. Maybe more fun than he had ever had in his life. This was truly how he liked to play. Not nice, not fair. He snuck around, set traps, and caused fear and chaos better than anyone else. He was so good, he was bad. And he felt bad. But it was for the best, wasn't it? Already he could see the kids clearly happier to have Sportacus back, the blue elf regaining his rightful place as the hero of LazyTown. He watched them all from a safe distance, now that he'd gotten the net off of his head. All of the kids were still worked up from their ordeal, and the sporty man was having a hard time calming them down. Robbie felt a painful ache in his chest with every hard feeling and harsh word the kids spat out about him. They were upset by his betrayal, naturally. Somehow, Robbie found it easier to absorb the anger steaming out of Trixie rather than the hurt and sadness pouring out of Ziggy or Stephanie. He didn't care to see or hear any more and slunk quietly away, leaving them alone. By the sound of things, they were going to have a party, and everyone would be invited. Everyone except for him, of course. That was to be expected. Things were just how they were meant to be.